Yeah, wait a second. I'll give a brief introduction to the IUBMB as well as the speakers itself. But yeah, hi everybody. So thank you for coming to our webinar. So this is organized by the IUBMB Trainee Initiative. So as mentioned, the title of the webinar is Crafting Clear Science, a Guide to Effective Writing for Scientific Trainees. And this features two speakers, Prof. Dong-Yen Jin and Prof. Efstathios Gonos. And so this is the agenda for today. I'll just give like a brief introduction for the IUBMB TI Trainee Initiative. And then we'll start with Prof. Dong-Yen Jin, and then we'll have Prof. Efstathios Gonos, and then we'll have like a collective Q&A. So please be reminded that you can use the Q&A box to actually ask your questions here. Right, so just a brief introduction to IUBMB Trainee Initiative. So we are by trainees for trainees, and we are a global organization whereby we aim to actually unite emerging scientists from across the globe. Some of our objectives involves to share scientific resources and knowledge, professional skills development, increasing accessibility and inclusivity, and to promote sustainable science. So the trainee initiative is actually made out of like 4 different regions from the IUBMB, which stands for the International Union of Biochemistry and Molecular Biology member societies. So FABS, which is the European region, FAOBMB, which is the Pan American Association, FAOBMB, which is where this webinar is organized by, and FASBMB, which is the Federation of African Societies. So, yeah, so these are the regional reps that you'll be seeing today. So I'm Jessie. I'm a PhD candidate in Duke NUS Medical School, Singapore. And we have Ryan, MD PhD graduate from the Philippines. And we also have Huilan, a PhD candidate from University Tunku Abdul Rahman, Malaysia. Right, so beyond that, we actually have quarterly webinars for trainees, and you can actually watch past recordings of our past events on our website through this QR code right here. And yeah, so these are some of our speakers today. So for now, we have Prof. Dong-Yen Jin. So I'll just give a brief introduction for Prof. Jin. So Prof. Dong-Yen Jin is the Claire and Lawrence Falk Professor in Precision Medicine, Senior Associate Dean of the University of Hong Kong Graduate School, and Deputy Director of the State Key Laboratory of Liver Research. He is a leading molecular virologist and serves as the editor of Virus Research and Associate Editor-in-Chief of Cell and Bioscience, the official journal of the Society of Chinese Bioscientists in America. So with that, Prof. Jin, you can just take it away.
Thank you, Jessie. So may I just share the screen? So in the next 20 minutes, I'll share with you some of my advice about how to write and publish a biomedical research paper. It does not. The start is I got frozen. So these first slides just show you how important scientific writing would be, and also the best English is that which gives the sense in the fewest short words. So that simple is also beautiful. So to improve your writing, one of the best way is to learn from your supervisor, and it is their responsibilities to correct your writing sentence by sentence. And you can also learn from the professional writers and other writers. So for scientific paper, most of the scientific papers in our field of biomedical science will be organized like this: the introduction followed by methods, and then the results and discussion. starting by Cell and Nature. Now they move the methods to the end. And there are more and more journals nowadays. And one kind of a format for the Cell and Cell series journals is that you have 55,000 characters for an article with 7 figures. But with the introduction of the supplementary figures, that goes, I mean, that's actually prolific. And you could actually have 20-some supplementary figures, for example, for the Science and the Science series of journals. But there is a new trend, and which is to limit the number of supplementary figures. Many of the journals now have this rule that you can only have equal number of supplementary figures compared to the figures in your main manuscript. Meaning that if you have 1 figure, you have 7 figures, then you only can have 7 supplementary figures. And each figure can only have 1 supplementary to support it. And another trend is that many of the journals go electronic. So you could actually publish, so many of them, they relieve the page limit so that you could present as many figures as possible, but only those data sets or the videos will go to supplementary. So there are many different journals nowadays, and the impact factor could be used to help to judge whether it is a very good journal. But this is actually a very, very challenging business. A journal with a very high impact factor might not be very good, and this is actually a very, very difficult, even for experienced authors, how to choose the target journal. And concerning the title of the manuscript, that there are some rules that are listed here, that it has to be specific. You don't need those waste works such as studies on so and so, investigating so and so, observations and so and so. And you have to be specific. Actions of antibiotics on bacteria is not sufficiently specific. And you have to use, for example, inhibition of growth of Mycobacterium tuberculosis by streptomycin. And nowadays, many journals can allow a title to be a sentence. In the old days, that is not possible. And then how to list the authors. The bottom line is that there is no agreed upon rules. And one trend is actually many of now make mandatory that you have to have a statement on the author's contribution. And in principle, the acquisition of funding only, the collection of data only, or the general supervision of the research group alone does not justify the authorship. More often, you can actually have joint first author and joint last authors. And the abstract is actually a mini version of your paper. And many more people will read your abstract, but not your full paper. So that's actually why the abstract should be comprehensive, and it should be appealing to non-specialists. And if you can do it in 100 words, don't use 200. Some of the journals, they use these structure abstract. As I'll be giving you a an example. So this is actually an example of our own abstract. So the first sentence is actually the background, and then several more sentences actually about the findings. And finally, that's actually the summary. So this is actually a landmark paper that is published by our colleagues, which is actually one of the first paper on SARS-CoV-2 and COVID-19. And this is actually the Lancet journal, so it is a structured abstract. The abstract is subdivided into the background, the methods, the findings, the interpretation. Actually, even if it's not structured, your abstract should contain these different parts. Maybe the methods part could be skip or be very, very brief, but basically all the other parts should also be contained in your abstract. And this is actually the landmark paper, which is actually selected to be one of the 30 in the history of 200 years of publication for Lancet. And it's these are the heroes behind these paper, because they actually took the courage, the vision, and the capability to have this done quickly and demonstrate to the work the high transmissibility of SARS-CoV-2. And after the abstract, the introduction, there are several different rules, and it's important that you state the rationale and also the method of investigation very briefly in the introduction. And for the methods section, that's the rule is that you should give sufficient details so that you could others could reproduce the work. For the results, there are several rules, but I will just remind you that actually even in the results, you should use the first one or two or more sentences to explain the rationale of the specific experiment. So in the introduction, you should explain rationale of the whole study, but in the results section, you should explain the rationale of your specific experiment. Why, how, and what do you expect? So these should be explained also in the results section. And how to make the figures is actually more and more challenging nowadays. Whether to use black and white and grayscale, and whether the color should be in RGB, which is optimized for presentation on the screen, or CMYK, which is optimized for appearing in the hard print version. And there are issues about the image integrity, which I will explain with some examples later. I mean, certain degree of processing is acceptable, but you have to do it on the whole figure. You just cannot select one part to enhance, to obscure, or move, or remove, or introduce something. And also the grouping of the images, you have to make it explicit. And then for the cropping of the gels, the community standard is to keep important bands. The uncropped gels should be shown in the supplementary. This is actually the new rule for by many of the journals. And below and upper than the target band, you should keep at least 6 bandwidths of the space. You should retain at least 6 bandwidths above and below the target band. So this is the RBG versus the CMYK. So one is optimized for presentation on the screen, the other on the print version. And this is about the bands, the gel cropping. So you could crop the gel, but you should keep the band widths above, below your target band. So that's actually one important rule. And this is actually one example of a gross manipulation of the plots. So panel A is the original image, but in this manipulated image, they electronically remove one band, or they add another band. So nothing is here in the original image, but they add something there. So neither of these is acceptable. And now we actually have softwares to pick up these forms of manipulations by most journals nowadays. And to duplicate the gel panels, that's actually the loading control for experiment A. And there is another experiment, experiment B, but the same loading control is used. So this is actually quite common, quite commonly found in many of the papers. So this is actually not acceptable because these are different experiments. You can't use the same loading control for different experiments. Or for contrast adjustment, the original image is like this, but if you change the contrast just to a specific band, then this is not accept, cannot be accepted. Or you change the contrast to remove the background. This is also not accepted. Or you plant some cells there, or you change the contrast of the original images like these, but you just change the contrast to highlight the signal in this part, which is also not acceptable because you have to do it on the whole image, but not on just one small part. So for the tense in the research paper, only two tense, either the present tense or the past tense. So when you are talking about the you are presenting the results in the table or figure, you can use the present tense. For example, figure 1 indicates, table 1 shows. And how to write the discussion. So you should present the principles, the relationships, and generalization shown by the results. You should not try to cover up. You should show how your results interpretations agree or do not agree with previously published findings. You should not be shy. You just discuss the wider theoretical implications of a study. And you could summarize your evidence for each of your conclusion. You have 5 conclusions. You could summarize the evidence to support these conclusions from, for example, 3 different figures of your results. And I'm sure that Professor Gonos will talk to you more about how to deal with the editors. So I will skip this part. Maybe I'll stop here so that I can save more time for questions later.
Okay, thank you, Prof. Jin. Okay, I will just share my screen again just so that we can I can introduce Prof. Gonos. All right, so please. Okay, now thank you, Prof. Jin, for the informative presentation. I'm pretty sure we'll have a lot of questions later on. Oh, sorry. So before I Before Prof. Gonos begins, I'll just give a short introduction for Prof. Gonos. So Prof. Gonos is the Director of Research at the National Hellenic Research Foundation, short form NHRF, Institute of Chemical Biology. Specializing in aging and longevity, he has authored over 150 research articles, 14 monographs, and holds patents for novel anti-aging products. Prof. Gonos is Editor-in-Chief of Mechanisms of Aging and Development and IUBMB Life, and serves on the editorial boards of several other journals. So with that, Prof. Gonos, please go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much. I assume that you all see my screen. And apart from Mechanisms of Aging and Development, I'm also the Editor-in-Chief of IUBMB Life, which is the leading journal within IUBMB. So I will very much continue from where Professor Yin has stopped. Once you prepare the paper, following the very good advice, it was just given, the article arrives to a journal, and then the journal should initiate what we call a peer review. And this is very, very essential because this is the only way to control the integrity and the reliability of the articles people submit and the articles the journals will publish. Here I have to say that the key figure, this is the very last bullet, are the reviewers. It's really the backbone of the whole process. And why do reviewers do the review? You can see various aspects in this slide. It is very important for them to familiarize themselves with the latest development. And of course, it is their duty to ensure that what is presented, it is in a very solid format, more or less according to the direction they were given by Professor Yin. So what is the purpose of peer review? To improve the quality of the work you are going to publish, to make sure that previous work is properly acknowledged. It is very important to determine correctly the importance of the findings a given article presents. Obviously, to maximize and to show clearly the significance of the work. And finally, to make sure that every relative reference is included. Now, many times we submit a paper to a journal and we receive what we call a desk review, a desk rejection. Means that when an article comes to the editor-in-chief, then we have to make sure that it passes the initial threshold to go for a peer review. And there are several aspects that we check. First of all, as it was mentioned already, it is very important to check about fraudulent data. And as it was mentioned by Professor Yin, now there are tools that we can clearly check if a paper contains manipulated data or data being published previously, or even the text. It is artificial text by ChatGPT, or because we just copy-paste material from other articles. Whenever any of these occasions occur, then the article is automatically desk rejected. Of course, we also check whether the language is proper. And something that many publishers do is they give us information whether the paper has been simultaneously submitted to another journal. That is not allowed. And in this case, your article will be desk rejected by all the journals you're going to submit it. So in case your article, it is not desk rejected, and I have to say that the majority of articles are desk rejected, not only due to all of these criteria, but also because if the editor believes that this paper is not going to be published, it will not send it for peer review, but it will send it back to the authors to try a lower impact factor journal. And this is beneficial for the authors because if you initiate a peer review, that is going to take several weeks, and you don't want to spend several weeks for something that you know in advance that the paper will not make it to a given journal. So you start by submitting a paper. We describe the desk rejection process. If this is not the case, then the editor will assign to reviewers. The reviewers they will provide the comments. Comments come back. We make a decision that will come back, and the decision could be either rejections or acceptance or revision. And then if we go to revision, most probably we'll go through the same round. Now, in addition to submit your paper, it is very important to submit a cover letter. And there are several golden rules what this cover letter should include. You should mention why your paper is important and fits well with a specific journal you have chosen. You should make special requirements. Mainly, I refer about reviewers. I mean, I'll come to that later on. I mean, you should refer to people that they are in the field and you believe that they will be good reviewers to objectively check your work. Here I have to say that if you got people from your same lab or your same university or people with whom you have published several papers together already, usually editors do not choose these reviewers because you understand that these people are, it is very likely to be extremely friendly to you and you will need an objective decision. Still, you can ask the editor to exclude people due to conflict of interest. If, for example, you have you work on hypothesis and there is a group that works on the opposite hypothesis, it is fair to say that a group of Dr. Smith works on totally different aspects, and I would refer Dr. Smith not to check my work. So this is a typical cover letter, and some other things is, give me a second. You have to say that the paper is approved by all authors. Or, as I mentioned, you have to highlight the importance of your work and to suggest reviewers. I refer to that. That usually helps, and that is very, very important to suggest reviewers, especially if you go to a journal of a general audience, a journal that focuses in biochemistry, molecular biology, or cell biology in general, like IUBMB Life, because there, by default, the editor will not be an expert on the field. If, on the other hand, you submit your work to a very specialized journal, so I work on aging, so if you're working on aging, you submit a work on an aging journal, then the editors and the editorial board are very, very familiar. But in any case, it is always strongly recommended to suggest about 3 to 6 potential reviewers, bearing in mind the limitations I referred just previously. Now, what's happened afterwards? If the paper is not rejected, there is a possibility, very, very rare, to be automatically accepted. And I would say that this is very unlikely to happen in every decent journal. If you have such a case, you should have concerns about the quality of the journal you have chosen. Straight rejection, it is very, very highly. As you see on the right, there's a probability of 40 to 90%. Therefore, you should not be despaired. And you should try also to understand why your paper was rejected. Of course, it is very essential to consider reviewers' advice, and I'll come to that later on, saying that even if the paper is rejected, when you're going to submit to another journal, you should revise it by the comments, the rejection comments you have received from the previous reviewers, because most probably you're going to receive the same comments if you do not revise your paper. Not only that, but I have to say that it is also very likely that even Journal A rejects your paper and then you submit it to Journal B, it is likely that to get some people that have reviewed your original work. So maybe the same people may go through your work. So in case your paper undergoes okay, so let me summarize first. We have the desk rejection, we have acceptance, that's very rare. Minor revision, meaning that your paper, it is very good to be accepted, but usually you need to optimize a few things. Minor revision usually does not require experiments or requires just the provision of some control experiments. Major revision is the most common situation where the paper could be published, but then some important experiments and clarifications are still needed. And of course, we have rejection. So when you get your paper back, first of all, you have to stay calm. I mean, I will keep saying that. And the more experienced you become, the more calm you will be. Read the comments. Reread the comments. You have to make sure that you read the comments in calmness and objectively. Pass the comments to a third party, not among the authors. I mean, just a friend from the next lab. Just for him, who is not at your work, just to be like an objective reviewer. Have a break and then make a table where you summarize how to deal with every comment. When you start responding to the comments, of course, obviously, the easiest will be to deal with the minor comments first. Then you go to the major comments that, as I mentioned, may require some additional experiments. Start to draft the response letter. And then there are several golden rules. Very important to be polite. I have to remind here that almost everyone does, especially the reviewers, all the job for free. Be thorough and answer with evidence. As I mentioned, be polite. Reviewers do this for free. And nowadays, we are bombarded with papers that we should review. And therefore, it is really an offer a person is doing by reviewing a paper for a journal or the authors. Make sure that you build a good feeling. Make a good impression. Especially in case you disagree with reviewers, and I will show later on a few phrases that you should use, and for sure do not use harsh language. So these are typical phrases. I'll give you a minute to read it, and there is a citation at the bottom. We agree with the referee, but the referee is right, but. So just use proper polite English to support your case. Address every comment. That's very important. You cannot ignore comments. I mean, whatever the comment is, you have somehow to respond. Do not ignore. Make a good impression. Answer with clarity and structure. And take time to make sure that you address everything with evidence. Especially when you disagree. If you disagree with a reviewer, and I'll come to that later on, you have to provide evidence why you do disagree. You have to provide extra data, especially if you disagree with a reviewer, just to show that what you present is correct. And of course, you have to add this information to your response letter. So you should address in your response letter both the editor and the reviewer. Of course, you should include in your response letters the manuscript title and ID. We receive thousands of papers, so it has to be clear that your response goes to the right domain. Make a summary, and of course, as I mentioned, address thoroughly all the disagreements. Now, there are cases, usually journals will provide you comments by two reviewers. This is the standard case, and I would say that even if you recommend two reviewers, usually at least one reviewer is not among the ones you have recommended. So there are cases that the reviewers disagree. or the reviewer might be wrong. There may also be comments that you don't understand. There are cases that, although I keep saying that you have to be polite, sometimes reviewers are not polite. And then if the comments are too harsh or they require another year and a half to address them, it is always a question whether you should submit your revised work to this journal or to take advantage of the comments you have received, revise your work, and to go elsewhere. Two reviewers may disagree. It happens. Why? For many reasons. I mean, maybe they have different opinions. Maybe not both of them are experts on the same figure. I mean, sometimes if an article covers various aspects, the editor-in-chief or the editor will assign it to reviewers with different backgrounds in order to cover all aspects of your work. Therefore, one reviewer may not be fully qualified to address all your data. Something that it also happens is that if the journal assigns the article to a very busy professor, the professor passes the review process to a postdoc or a senior PhD student. Therefore, maybe this person, it is not fully familiar with your work. If the reviewers disagree, ask the editor. The editor is a kind of referee between you and the reviewers. And don't go for the middle ground. Take a position, whether you agree with one reviewer or not the other, and support your case. The reviewer might be wrong. I mentioned why. Not all the reviewers are equal, because some are very experienced, some others may not be. It is not necessary to agree with them. And as I mentioned already, use the editor-in-chief as a judge between you and the reviewers. And always be polite and don't presume by default that you are right. Maybe the reviewer may be wrong, may be right. So to submit or to go elsewhere, as I mentioned already, never submit the same version of an article elsewhere. Take advantage of the reviewer's comments, because by default, these are things that they will improve your work. And as I mentioned already, maybe the same person will review your work to journal number B. And here I quote some references for further reading. You can take advantage of all of these things. Or if you like, you can write to me and I will pass the information. And I will stop here. And I think now it is time for questions. Thank you very much. I'll stop sharing.
Thank you so much, Prof. Gonos, for sharing your informative slides and going through the entire peer review process. So let us begin with the Q&A. So let's start with the most highly voted one here. So one of the attendees actually mentioned that sometimes early career researchers use AI tools for proofreading. Would you classify such an output as AI generated?
I don't think most of the journals have a policy on that yet.
Okay, so I guess no further input, we can move on to the next one, which is, in your experience, what is the most common problem trainees have in their writing? What tips do you have to overcome or prevent it?
I mean, different people have different weaknesses in writing, so it depends. But the most difficult part might be the discussion part, which I mean, there might be also two extremes. One is to go to do not stick to the original theme of the paper and talk and go too far away. And the other is actually to say very, very few words in the discussion and cannot write out the significance, the values, importance of the study. Practice makes perfect. So by practicing more, that might be overcome. Maybe Professor Gonos would also.
Yeah, and if I may add a few comments on that, an advice I will give is that when you start writing a paper, first of all, decide about figures. Make your figures, make the figure legends, and pass them to somebody just from the next lab to make sure that she understands what you present. On the basis of figures, you write the results. And so results should be subdivided to sections according to what you present. And I would say that in every paragraph in the results, the first sentence should be a summary of what you present. Then you present the data, and the last sentence should be just the conclusion. Very, very simple. Then on the basis of that, materials and methods will be easy. Introduction will be relatively easy. Discussion, as Professor Yin has mentioned, it is the most difficult part because usually not experienced people, they just repeat results on discussion. Here you have to be critical. And that requires experience. And for that, you should seek the advice of your supervisor or more senior people in the lab, just to make sure that you critically judge your own work, as well as in comparison to the work of other labs who work on a similar area.
Thank you both. All right, so we have the next question. So, when writing results, do you start with reporting previous research of similar work, and before reporting your finding and aligning reporting? If your finding agree or disagree, or it's the other way around, your results then previous finding and reporting if they conform or not. I guess basically to kind of summarize what the question is asking is, do you write about previous literature and also whether how would you arrange it when you do you put the literature first or do you put your results afterwards?
So actually, for extensive discussion of the background and the published work, it should be in the introduction. For the results part, you should actually very briefly talk about the rationale of your specific experiment. For example, if you did 5 different experiments and your results, each of them you could use a very short sentence to explain the rationale of experiment 1, and then just like what Professor Gonos had suggested, is actually the first 1 or 2 sentences, and then your results, and then the summary or the conclusion. And for discussion, for example, to compare and contrast your findings with previous ones with published results, that should go to the discussion. But the very sharp conclusion of your experiment should go to the end of the results, each of your specific results.
Yes, and if I also add a few things, in the introduction, you should give the background, and in theory, you should also declare the gap in the literature and how your work fulfills the gap. And that's why it is always a good practice, the very last paragraph on the introduction, just to give the flavor of what comes next. The last paragraph should not be a summary of the abstract, but it should be the questions you aim to address. Then in the discussion, it is the critical evaluation of your work in comparison to other studies. So the pure background is on the introduction, and you quote the gap that you aim to fulfill, and then the critical evaluation of your work comes in the discussion.
I guess in a way it's like how would I put it? Like building a story, would you put it like that?
I would like that, Jessie. I mean, I always like when I read a paper to be like a story. I mean, just make the reader being curious what comes next. I mean, it is not so easy, so it is not like a romance, but you have to make the reader not to feel very bored about your work. Okay?
Okay, next up we have, next up there's on my screen mentions, should we inform the editor that our work has been published as a poster before? Should we include this in the cover letter of the article? Thank you.
Usually not. It is most journals took it for granted that you could present it as a poster in conference.
Yeah,
so that might not be necessary to list it in the cover letter.
Yeah, that is not necessary if you have presented to a conference. But nowadays, people upload preprints, and usually plagiarism checks identifies that. You may quote it because sometimes, depending on the publisher, these machines are not very reliable. So if you have uploaded a preprint somewhere, it is a good habit just to quote it. Because if not, it will be identified. But not posters. I mean, posters, I mean, we know that people present works in conferences.
Okay, thank you for that. And then we have next up, what should I do if I want to publish a review article instead of a primary article? How does the review process change? Should I apply to a special journal instead?
So for review articles, some of the review articles are invited. There are some other journals that publish review articles, but if you want to submit a review, usually the review has to be written by someone who has established reputation in the field. So that's actually one factor to be put into consideration. And also the review should actually be very critical. It is not just the documentation of what is found, what has been done, but why it is done, and how it compares and contrasts with other studies. And you also need to offer your own views, perspectives. So that's so the reviews are actually the peer review process of the reviews is slightly different, and they look for some of these criteria, not the primary results.
Yeah, I will fully agree with Professor Yin. I mean, usually we consider reviews from established scientists. Therefore, if you're just a PhD student or an early postdoc, usually you don't have the experience to submit such an article. And a mistake usually students do, I mean, a review is not the introduction of your PhD thesis. It is not just a collection of data, it is a critical evaluation of data. And in order to be critical, usually you have to spend several years in work. Therefore, that's why we have the tendency to accept reviews from senior people, unless you like to submit an opinion article, which is a totally different case. But for that, you should ask the editor-in-chief in advance. I mean, I have this idea. Would you think that this is suitable? And some journals accept these opinion articles, which could be contradictory. But again, you have to have a very strong experimental and scientific case why such an idea should be worth being published.
Okay, there is a couple of questions with like 3 votes. So first of which, how should we prioritize or identify the correct papers to cite? Sometimes there are 10 to 20 possible papers that can be cited.
Usually, you should choose the primary research paper, the first paper that report a particular that make a particular finding, and only if you I mean, if it is not the most critical one, then sometimes you could cite review articles. So you should stick to the most important one, the most the first paper, primary research paper. So that's actually one thing, or one general principle. And also, when you suggest reviewers, I mean, it mainly what paper to cite mainly depends on how you understand the field. So when you suggest reviewers, you should also be careful to cite their important papers. If you suggest some reviewer, and if the editor follow your suggestion, and your paper goes to a particular reviewer, but even their very important papers in the field that you do not cite, then it's not polite, and that might not give them a good impression. So you should bear in mind that you should also cite important papers from your suggested reviewers, and also other potential reviewers in the field.
Yes, I fully agree. And 2 more comments. Sometimes in the reviewer list, you have the person who got a Nobel on the discovery of your area. And I would say usually such important people do not have the time to review your work. So avoid the huge names, because by default, these people are going to be very, very busy. Another bad impression is if you quote 40 references in the reference list, and 20 of them come from your group. I mean, you have to be modest. Sometimes it does happen. I mean, people try to overemphasize their own work, but you have to cite your own work, especially if it is related, but with modesty, and to give space for every other group that has done similar work also to be cited, especially as Professor Ying has said, because the editor will choose reviewers based on the reference list, especially if he's not familiar himself or herself by the topic.
Okay, we have, due to time constraints, we'll just keep it to the last 2 questions with 4 votes. So first of which is, what should I do if I get 2 reviewers that have opposite viewpoints? Will the editor help me decide which reviewers' comments I should focus on?
Actually, it would be good to check with the editor before you start your revision. If you encounter opposite views in the 2 reviews. So yeah, that's my advice.
Yeah, I will say on that. That's the best way to go.
Okay, and then we have the next one, which is, how do you determine the impact of your work and find the right journal for it? Are there any resources that can help us figure this out?
So the impact factors would be one thing that you could trying to judge whether the paper is good or whether it is the right journal. But usually you should actually check with your supervisor and to decide together with him or her which journal would be your target journal, because this is actually usually it's actually the journals that if you don't even if you never read that journal, then it's less likely or justified that you should publish in that journal. So you should choose the journals that you like, that you read most often, and also have good reputations in the field.
Yes, exactly. I mean, go to journals you read. Go to journals that they publish works similar to yours. I mean, this is the best advice.
That's great. All right. Thank you so much to Prof. Gonos and Prof. Jin. So let me just share one last screen for everybody. So thank you guys for attending this webinar. So if you guys want to stay connected with the IUBMB Trainee Initiative, please just follow our socials, check out our website. This webinar is recorded and will be uploaded to our YouTube channel, the IUBMB, in a week's time. But before that, I really want to thank both our speakers, Prof. Gonos and Prof. Jin, for taking your time out to share all this useful information for people like us, because we are still trainees, and this is really helpful for all of us. Thank you so much.
Our pleasure. Thank you for inviting us.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Now, we have come to the end of the webinar. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.